Your family's home has been invaded. Your closest surviving relative and mentor killed in the strike. And you've been left for dead by the very enemy tormenting your land. You are Jin Sakai, and to fend off these invaders, you must adapt to new ways. His realization, coming after Jin has been left broken and battered, is a moment of rebirth. This is the beginning of Ghost of Tsushima. It introduces the painful tragedies that follow Jin throughout Ghost, the thrills of the stylish combat and intriguing open world we are yet to fully explore, and the call to revenge which serves as Jin's driving force. And it's all elegantly wrapped up in a single moment. A title card presented as the music swells, players take the reins, and Jin bursts out into an open field. It's incredibly impactful and has been lauded by players as such, but the title card scene around the streaming world almost didn't happen, were it not for some critique from a PlayStation executive outside the Sucker Punch team that ignited that spark of creativity to build this beautiful scene. To find out how the sequence came to be, IGN spoke to members of the Sucker Punch team and that PlayStation executive about its origins, the intention behind it, and the incredible reaction to it they've seen since Ghost of Tsushima launched. This is Art of the Level. The origins of Ghost of Tsushima's title card sequence are actually quite easy to trace. But like with any story, and particularly a story within a game so fascinated with the ways we tell stories, there are plenty of sides to it. No matter who's telling this story though, they always come back to one key moment and one important piece of feedback spurred by the first public demonstration of Ghost gameplay in 2018.
That story starts with that E3 2018 moment where, when Jin jumps on that horse and rides through the meadow and the wind is blowing and the foliage is flowing everywhere and you felt like you could reach out and touch it. I think that was a special moment for me personally, and I know it was just looking around in the crowd as we were watching that trailer. It was a special moment for a lot of people.
And at one point, we had a build that was played, and Scott Rohde had played the build, as well as some of the other product development team members.
They'd played the build, and we were gonna do a few days of meetings and things like that. And it was like one of those things, like as the meeting is breaking up, and Scott's sitting there, and I was teasing him because I'm positive about this because it had happened in the wake of E3. He's sitting there wearing counterfeit Ghost merch. And it's he's wearing a shirt that somebody had made inspired by the E3 demo.
He's sort of going off about this, watching the E3 experience for him and how, that E3 experience got him excited about playing a game about a samurai. That was like the first time he just really was like, oh man, like I see this, I get this.
So we'd been working pretty hard on an introductory sequence to the game that would kind of teach you what we needed to know. And at some point you got onto a horse and you could ride it across this field for a little bit. But then some Mongols would come upon you and you had to get off and hide.
And Scott's sitting there in his red shirt, all proud of himself. And Scott's very careful about giving negative feedback. But, kind of as the meeting winds down, he's like, I got to say, though, at the moment, I got my horse, it was like you gave me something that I had to go do, and what I wanted was that E3 demo where you rode down this hill and it like gave me a sense of adventure and the music and
the story kind of forced the fact that I had to get off the horse, and that was something that I had been building up towards because of that trailer and the promise of that. So it was just a disappointing moment,
and we had effectively pulled the rug out from underneath him. That moment that he had expected wasn't there, and it was a huge bummer for him.
He's very animated, and it was infectious. Like, we immediately understood what he was saying, you could see why what he was saying was right, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a big opportunity. Like, how did we not think of this immediately?
And that was my simple feedback, was when I jumped on that horse, I wanted to experience the promise of what was teased in that trailer, and it wasn't there. And I think just a light bulb went off, and then the team worked their magic and was able to pull off what to me is one of the most special moments I've ever experienced in a game.
And afterwards, I remember, sort of talking with Jason. He's like, oh, dude, I got it. And you could see he's already sort of like, gone where he needs to go creatively.
Thankfully, Jason Connell had this fantastic idea of how to kind of recreate that E3 feeling with a release to open world moment.
All the other feedback was great, but it sort of kind of went to the sides for me. And I was like, wow, that person had a transformative feeling about something he saw, and our game didn't deliver. And that's super important because we don't have a lot of assets out there to the public, right? So if he's feeling this way, then certainly somebody else might be feeling that way.
Connell wasn't actually disheartened by Rhodey's feedback. He took inspiration from it and quickly transformed the criticism into a moment that would resemble the title card sequence in the final game. A moment he somewhat stumbled upon by accident, but would encapsulate the whole of Ghost of Tsushima's tone. As Connell himself put it, he didn't see the feedback as a problem, but rather an opportunity to address some lingering, related questions the team had been working to answer.
We were already having some conversations, myself and Nate, about, man, where's our open world moment? We feel like we're just kind of casually saying, okay, now you're there. It wasn't really, hey, welcome to the rest of the game. And the game at that point we knew had two sides to it. It had that super Golden Path story, and it had that wide, adventurous, the spirit of adventure exploration side of it that we really cherished. And so at some point you're going to spend a lot of time in the open world, and we didn't have that moment. Within 2 days, I think the idea had already started shaping up. At least for me. I mean, I may have been by even the end of that day. This is the kind of person I am. I hear a problem, and I personally think I can't think about anything else until that problem is solved. And this one it didn't feel like a problem. It felt like an opportunity. I guess that's a better way to see it.
Prior to this meeting, Sucker Punch hadn't created a proper title sequence, but Connell did have thoughts about what form it might take. They had been inspired by prestige TV show openings and had begun to play with the idea of something akin to The Crown's title sequence, but with the forging of a sword.
And so that was kind of our ambition. It was like, oh, we should put one of these in here. It's really classy. It's kind of an interesting way that maybe we could potentially outsource this to to some firm to give us a shortcut to some tonally great feeling about what it is to become a samurai, or whatever that might be.
Connell said these thoughts never really extended beyond the ideation phase. No outside firm was contracted to actually craft a pre-made title sequence. And after Rhodey's comments, he began to see how such a sequence might work with what they already had.
We had a placeholder spot for it, and we even had a placeholder in there. It was, just kind of some kind of rip-o-matic of some version of what we might want. But in the end, that was not something else came up in its place. This other thing beautifully kind of came up that I don't think we planned it to be that way, but that's the best part of game development, is that you think you want to have something, and then that actually ends up being just a fine idea, and something else better might take its place if you keep your ears and your hearts open to it.
Connell took Rhodey's now infamous criticism to heart and plotted how best to bring that E3 gameplay sequence's sense of wonder to Ghost's opening. And a title sequence answered a number of interesting design questions the team still had.
It was sort of about 5 things all in one. It was like, okay, I want to make sure Scott has that feeling, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. And to me, it was like, okay, maybe we can encapsulate that into our welcome to the open world. And we have this title sequence thing that we haven't done. What if we did the title sequence actually here? We definitely had specific goals that we already needed to accomplish, and some of those were and were not working. So maybe we could accomplish fixing some of those problems in this moment.
He found a location that would be a good starting point. It was near the first missions in the game, but it was also stunningly beautiful.
It was called Golden Lake. It's a beautiful spot. It was still kind of in visual development, but I knew that it was going to be a really pretty location because of the effort we were putting there. So I took a bunch of videos on my dev kit of, in different time of days and different kind of lighting scenarios. But mostly I was looking for like composition and sort of timing. And I was playing that track of music. And so I'd do all these videos, and then I would put it in like something like After Effects or Premiere, and I'd put that track of music on, and I would try to time it.
Cannell eventually arrived on the pass that would cement the title card sequence almost by accident. The example he would ultimately screen to the rest of the team to showcase the potential for this moment happened unscripted, as he rode his horse around the open world. Breaking through the tree line, a systemic group of enemies was nearby. When Jin encounters foes like this, Ghost flashes white to raise the player's awareness. But here, it happened just as he came out of the brush, making the moment feel bigger, more grand than he anticipated. Of course, players don't instantly run into a group of Mongol enemies in the finished version, but the confluence of this moment instilled the idea in Cannell's head. This could be it.
So I put it all in After Effects, I put the track of music on it, I kind of muted the systemic kind of sound of enemies coming nearby, and I just let the music swell, and put the logo and put that on, and I just sent it to a couple people on our team.
There was, naturally, work to be done to achieve its final form, especially with an idea that came so late into the production of Ghost of Tsushima.
So those teams get to it, and it changes from a good idea into something that I can only describe as magic. Where the first time I watched it after that, I remember feeling chills, and you're like, oh my God, what has happened? This is so amazing.
The timing and momentum of Ghost of Tsushima's title card sequence may have been a bit of a happy accident, but Cannell and the wider Sucker Punch team worked to make sure everything about it in the finished product reflected the intensity of Cannell's early pass. One of the key decisions was what time of day the scene would be set during. Ghost's day-night cycle includes a number of beautiful options, but as Jin and his horse break out from the tree line and into a field of white-tipped grass, the sky is cloudy. That decision was made purposefully.
Where we go with a kind of a brooding, lightly stormy cloud, but there's this break of bright light kind of washing across the grass, almost like there's like hope on the horizon, that it's not just cloudy, but it's not a beautiful day, that this is going to be a sunny journey. Like, it's got a mix, there's some darkness looming, but there's also hope, and there's a little bit of light.
Paramount to the entire sequence working as well is the score, which would come to be known as Jin's theme, but at the time was simply a pull from much of the in-progress music being produced for the wider game. It wasn't necessarily recorded specifically for the sequence, but it had all the elements needed to deliver the impact Rhodey had missed and Cannell was building.
So that track was not really used anywhere in the game yet. We'd actually just gotten it really recently from one of our composers, from Ilan Ushkeri. And when we heard it, it was just instantly iconic, right? It just had that nice, like you said, that slow build up, that massive crescendo, that just beautiful main melody. And that's what we were looking for all the music really in Ghost, is just evocative, emotional, memorable.
The track is essential to that sequence success. And with the musical tone set, the next step was to edit it so the crescendo of the track lines up with Jin's burst into the field.
As we kept playing around with the timing of that, we had to re-edit the music multiple times. Our music team had to kind of just change it a little bit, because if that crescendo did not hit exactly as Jin was coming out of the forest and into the field, it just lost that kind of those chills that we were getting, and kind of what made it that big moment was just that perfect timing of the build up and then the release kind of hitting with that main melody.
And even for players who realize they are in control at this moment, no matter how they direct the horse, the moment can't actually be ruined.
The horse is actually on a rail at that point, so the player can move, but the timing is still fairly kind of rigid with when they're actually going to reach that crescendo spot.
A few of the things that happen while you burst out of the woods out into that field of pampas grass, there is a very human connection as Jin leans down to feel the tops of the grass. Something we've all done, and so it's fairly easy to relate, and it puts you in that mode because everybody feels on their hand the memory of those tips of grass. Also, there are a lot of murmuring starlings, those big flocks of birds that move around, And so the sky is alive with life.
The world is alive around Jin, brimming with potential. Points of interest to visit, mysteries to uncover, characters to meet. And this moment has to instantly convey all of that. In the distance, you see a temple. On the right, there's a Mongol stronghold. Over to the left, you can see a river brimming with activity.
It's very packed with things to discover, and suddenly you're a bit, taken in by just how much choice there is. And that's all on purpose.
But building this sequence to encapsulate the promise of the larger Ghost of Tsushima experience didn't stop at fine-tuning the title card moment itself. As Nate Fox described it, there was actually some pretty major surgery required as a result of this sequence becoming a centerpiece of the opening.
We actually cut a massive section of gameplay off of that, and then moved it in later as a mission. Eagle-eyed players will no doubt have put it together, but when you're released to the open world, the mission start that's nearest to you happens to be Yuna, who is the person you were just with. And when you talk to her, she says, let me take you to where they're holding my brother. And she takes you on a horse ride back north to exactly where you just were with her when you separated from her.
The simple act of moving that mission after players are introduced to the open world makes it one of several choices the player can make, rather than another moment along a more authored series of quests. That mission is also when Jin stabs someone in the back, breaking his code and taking his first steps toward becoming the Ghost.
And I couldn't be happier. I think the exchange was totally worth it. By moving that mission out, we got more time to let that feeling of transformation on Jin kind of sink in with the player. And I think even more importantly, it let players have the freedom that they wanted earlier. And, that's, you can't put a price tag on that.
We really want to make it clear that part of this is over. Like, you are done with the linear sequence. Now, have at it. And we worked hard to try and shorten the amount of time it took to get there, because we felt like, hey, we've got to get players here. They will be patient with us in linear training, onboarding content, but not forever. And so you have to keep trimming them back and streamlining those moments to get players to this point. And this was, like I said, the capstone of the first hour. And it was something we really focused hard on, was how to get that to happen between, 35 and 55 minutes into the play experience for a really wide swath of players.
Ensuring Ghost of Tsushima's prologue propels players to that title card sequence is also a decision that has paid off in spades. Over a year after its launch, new players are constantly caught off guard, with some being brought to tears, as Jin makes his triumphant breakthrough into Sucker Punch's meticulously crafted 12th century Japan.
Are you kidding, dude? Are you kidding?
After speaking with the developers about how this magic moment came to be, it's clear there's no singular element that brings the moment to such evocative life, but rather it's the confluence of every discipline within Sucker Punch coming together to create it. And it would undoubtedly not have existed without Scott Rohde's bit of criticism.
It's uncommon but not unusual is that we will get feedback like this. They're always very careful about trying to help us make the best version of the game. That's our vision. But along that journey, they will inevitably give you a pearl or two. And I'm happy that we get to share this kind of a story, because I think it reflects a very healthy working relationship.
I think it's a really good example of how, when you're making a video game, you might think you have a plan, but the plan is completely subject to what actually ends up feeling good, feeling right. On paper, things might be very logical, but it doesn't matter. You have to actually experience it and be really honest about how you're feeling while playing it. And so hats off to Scott Rohde for just saying, this is how I'm feeling right now.
Rohde kindly downplayed his influence on the moment, giving due credit to the team who took his feedback and ran with it.
I think just a light bulb went off, and then the team worked their magic and was able to pull off what to me is one of the most special moments I've ever experienced in a game.
I can't overstate that somebody having an emotion is step one, But really, big props to Jason Connell for making the big leap of saying, here's how we can get that emotion. That's just straight up artistry right there. That little inspiration moment. That's the kind of thing that they don't happen all the time. And so when they do occur, you want to protect it and make it kind of go from a spark into a fire.
And for Cannell, that spark was an opportunity to not only evoke the emotions Rhodey's reaction spoke to, but also to create solutions to numerous lingering questions. And, in the end, it created a moment that encapsulated Jin's and players' journeys through the world of Ghost of Tsushima.
You gotta have good pacing. You gotta have moments where you're just like, ooh and ah, and then you gotta have moments where you're really into the combat. And then you gotta have moments where you step back and go, oh my god, that was amazing. And we just didn't really have anything that stepped back a little bit and just said, hey, take a breather and think about this big saga that you're now hopefully invested in. And so that to me felt like the biggest reason to do it is like, hey, let's underline this and put an exclamation mark at the end and say, you know, take a breath. You're on a big adventure now.
I really hope you enjoyed our deep dive on Ghost of Tsushima. Be sure to check out our other Art of the Levels, and please leave a comment on what game you'd like to see us cover next.